Liam, Connor, and Marcus were just faces in Liverpool's night crowd, blending into the chaos of flashing lights and booming music. But behind their casual smiles and seemingly ordinary lives, they controlled a secret empire of drugs, fear, and violence, turning the city's nightlife into a hunting ground. What they did in the shadows would haunt Liverpool for years, leaving victims too terrified to speak, and a police force desperate to catch them before the next attack. Liverpool's nightlife was vibrant, full of neon lights, thumping music, and crowds that filled the streets every weekend. Tourists and locals alike flocked to the city's bars, clubs, and late-night venues, seeking excitement and entertainment. But beneath the lively facade, there was a hidden danger that few could see. Unbeknownst to most, a small but highly organized gang had begun to take control of the night streets. They were not ordinary criminals, they were meticulous, patient, and ruthless. Their operations combined drug distribution with violent assaults, and their methods ensured that their activities went largely unnoticed for years. The gang was careful about how they presented themselves. On the surface, they appeared to be just part of the nightlife, friends laughing together, clubbers, or even security staff. But in reality, they were orchestrating a network of terror. They studied the routines of people leaving clubs, identifying those who were most vulnerable, young women out with friends, tourists unfamiliar with the city, and anyone who appeared intoxicated. They used subtle intimidation and cunning manipulation, creating situations where victims felt confused, ashamed, or too frightened to speak up. Each move was calculated to ensure they remained invisible to law enforcement and unnoticed by the public. They built their network like a machine. Each member had a specific role, carefully chosen for their skills and knowledge. Some were responsible for supplying the drugs, ensuring they remained hidden and difficult to trace. Others acted as lookouts, monitoring entrances and exits, while a few carried out the assaults. The gang moved as a unit, blending into crowds while maintaining control over their operations. Unlike reckless criminals, they avoided drawing attention, choosing quiet alleyways and back entrances to conduct their crimes. Even when someone noticed something suspicious, the gang's preparation made it nearly impossible to link them to any wrongdoing. For years, the city unknowingly allowed the syndicate to grow. Police were aware of occasional drug-related incidents, but the pattern of violence remained obscured. Victims often experienced memory gaps due to the substances they were given, and many were too terrified to report what had happened. Friends and family tried to piece together fragmented stories, but without concrete evidence, the gang remained untouchable. This fear and silence allowed them to operate with impunity, gradually expanding their reach across Liverpool's nightlife. It was a chilling reminder that danger can exist where it is least expected. The gang's ability to remain hidden within everyday life made them more dangerous than anyone imagined. While the city celebrated its bustling nightlife, unaware eyes were being watched, and lives were quietly destroyed. The threat was not abstract or random. It was organized, methodical, and persistent. The streets that once felt safe after dark became arenas for control, manipulation, and fear. This hidden network was only the beginning. The events that followed would reveal how deeply the gang had embedded itself into Liverpool's night scene, and how even the brightest neon lights could not illuminate the darkness they brought with them. For years the city remained oblivious, but the cracks in their operation were about to emerge, setting the stage for a shocking investigation that would expose the horrifying reality behind Liverpool's nightlife. The gang's rise was not sudden. It was calculated, deliberate, and fueled by opportunity. Once they realized how easy it was to manipulate nightlife, they began to expand their operations. Clubs, bars, and late-night venues became the perfect hunting ground. They noticed that people leaving these places were often vulnerable, intoxicated, distracted, or alone. The gang learned to exploit these moments, using a combination of charm, threats, and substances to control their victims. Every detail of their expansion was meticulously planned, allowing them to grow without raising suspicion. They moved like a network of shadows, each member understanding their role within the operation. One supplied the drugs, ensuring a constant flow that was difficult to trace. Another monitored the streets, noting when potential victims left venues or wandered into quieter areas. Others carried out the most violent acts, striking quickly and disappearing before anyone could react. Their teamwork made them efficient and unpredictable. No single member ever acted alone, and this coordination kept them several steps ahead of authorities. Even as their reach grew across Liverpool, they avoided patterns that could make them vulnerable. The gang's expansion was aided by their knowledge of the city. They memorized the back alleys, unlit streets, and abandoned buildings that provided cover. They learned which venues had the most distracted security staff, or the busiest exits where incidents could go unnoticed. They began distributing drugs inside clubs, often blending them into drinks or handing them out with smiles. Victims rarely realized what was happening until it was too late. Some woke up confused in strange locations, unable to recall the events of the night. This method of operation ensured fear and silence became powerful tools, further shielding the gang from exposure. As their confidence grew, the gang became more daring. They tested new tactics, watched how people reacted, and adjusted their plans accordingly. Their criminal empire was not just about violence, it was a business in control, logistics, and manipulation. They created lists, tracked movements, and studied patterns, treating their victims as variables in a system they could control. Money flowed steadily from these activities, giving them the means to strengthen their influence, bribe insiders, or acquire better tools for their crimes. Despite their increasing audacity, the gang remained nearly invisible. Regular patrons and even local authorities often walked past them without noticing anything unusual. They blended into the nightlife, sometimes acting as club staff or security, sometimes simply as groups of friends enjoying the evening. The brilliance and danger of their strategy lay in this invisibility. The more ordinary they seemed, the less suspicion they raised. By the time the first reports of strange incidents surfaced, the gang had already established a vast and organized network. Their rise demonstrated how easily fear, manipulation, and carefully planned operations could take control of an environment designed for fun and socializing. They were no longer a small group. They had become a force that dominated Liverpool's night streets. The city would soon discover the horrifying consequences of this expansion. But at this stage, the gang operated almost like ghosts, present everywhere, yet untouchable and ready to strike again with terrifying precision. The first major clue came unexpectedly, as often happens in investigations. One night, paramedics were called to a city street after a young woman collapsed near a taxi rank. At first it seemed like a routine case of alcohol overconsumption, but blood tests revealed traces of a rare and potent substance, one that was rarely seen in the local area. This discovery immediately raised concern among authorities. When they dug deeper, they found that 3 other women had recently experienced similar incidents outside clubs in the same district. The similarities were too specific to be coincidences. All had collapsed in public spaces, all showed signs of chemical influence, and all had gaps in their memory regarding the events that led up to their condition. Police began to suspect that these were not isolated incidents but part of a deliberate and coordinated operation. The notion that a gang could use drugs to target victims in public spaces was chilling. Detectives started analyzing each case meticulously, mapping the locations, times, and potential witnesses. Slowly, a pattern began to emerge. The victims were not random. They were people who fit a profile. Young, often alone or separated from friends, and likely to attract minimal attention in a busy nightlife environment. The gang's careful planning became clear. They had studied their victims' habits and movements, and each attack was executed with precision. The investigation faced numerous challenges. Many victims could not recall what had happened during the hours they were under the influence of the drugs, making eyewitness accounts unreliable. Others were reluctant to come forward, fearing judgment or retaliation. The gang's strategy of creating confusion and fear had worked perfectly, ensuring that victims were left isolated, disoriented, and silent. Police had to piece together fragmented evidence from CCTV footage, toxicology reports, and witness statements. Every detail mattered, no matter how small. because even the slightest oversight could allow the gang to continue operating. Detectives began to see the broader implications of the case. This was no longer just a series of drug-related incidents. It was evidence of an organized syndicate using fear, chemicals, and control to manipulate victims systematically. The crimes were intentional, repeated, and carefully orchestrated, which meant that the gang was sophisticated and experienced. Officers realized they were dealing with a network that had operated undetected for years, and the scale of the operation was likely much larger than the initial cases suggested. The breakthrough marked the beginning of a determined effort to uncover the syndicate. Investigators started focusing on the connections between the victims, mapping their movements, and identifying potential common points of contact. The rare substance found in the first patient's system became a critical clue, linking separate incidents and suggesting that the gang had access to chemicals that were not easily obtained. It was a dangerous moment for Liverpool's nightlife. The revelation that a group of criminals had been quietly controlling events and targeting vulnerable people sent shockwaves through the police department. The first major clue was only the starting point, but it set in motion a chain of investigation that would eventually expose the terrifying scope of the gang's activities. The network that had remained hidden in plain sight for years was beginning to unravel, and every discovery brought authorities closer to confronting a reality that the city had been blind to for far too long. Liverpool was on the brink of uncovering a nightmare lurking just beneath the surface of its night streets. The investigation took a significant turn when police turned their attention to CCTV footage across Liverpool's busiest nightlife districts. Hours upon hours of recordings from club entrances, streets, and parking areas were meticulously reviewed, frame by frame. Initially, the footage seemed overwhelming, faces blurred in crowds, people moving in every direction, the chaos of nightlife making patterns nearly impossible to detect. But detectives knew that even the smallest clue could lead to a breakthrough. Slowly, subtle consistencies began to emerge. Certain men appeared repeatedly, always near victims shortly before they were found disoriented or missing. Their presence was almost casual, blending perfectly into the crowd, yet the timing suggested something far more sinister. Officers mapped every sighting, noting the times, locations, and accompanying individuals. They discovered that the gang moved in coordinated groups, often surrounding potential victims without drawing attention. On camera, they appeared like ordinary clubgoers or security staff. Yet the footage revealed careful observation and deliberate movement. They followed people out of clubs, sometimes for blocks, before leading them to odal streets or hidden alleys. The gang's precision was chilling. Every step seemed calculated, every action rehearsed. Even experienced detectives were unnerved by the level of planning displayed. The CCTV trail also exposed the gang's mobility. They did not remain in one area but shifted across multiple venues and neighborhoods, making it difficult for authorities to anticipate their next move. This movement ensured that local police reports alone were insufficient, as incidents were scattered across the city. Detectives realized that understanding the gang's routes, timing, and patterns was essential for building a case. The footage became a roadmap of the syndicate's operations, showing how a small group of men could dominate vast areas of Liverpool's nightlife without being noticed. Another alarming discovery came when investigators noticed the gang's use of back entrances and unlit pathways. Many victims were led away from public view just moments after leaving crowded areas. The gang seemed to know which routes were safe, which streets had minimal surveillance, and which areas offered cover from passers-by. They even timed their actions with the city's patrol schedules, avoiding areas where law enforcement presence was high. Every detail suggested that the syndicate had studied the city as if it were a board game, mapping each move to maximize control and minimize risk. The CCTV investigation also revealed something unexpected. The gang had supporters within the nightlife industry. Some security staff and bouncers seemed to overlook suspicious behavior, allowing the perpetrators to pass without interference. Whether through fear, bribery, or manipulation, these individuals inadvertently helped the gang maintain dominance. This insight complicated the investigation, as it indicated that the network extended beyond the men committing the assaults themselves. The syndicate had built an ecosystem, with participants and enablers scattered throughout Liverpool's nightlife. With the footage forming a clearer picture, detectives began preparing strategies to intercept the gang. Each frame provided insight into how victims were selected, how the gang coordinated, and how crimes were executed. The CCTV trail turned chaos into clarity, revealing that what once seemed like random incidents were actually the result of careful planning and coordination. Every image, every recorded movement, brought investigators closer to exposing the full scope of the operation and confronting the terrifying reality of a syndicate that had thrived in plain sight for years. Just when investigators believed they were close to understanding the gang's full operation, a shocking revelation surfaced. A former club bouncer came forward anonymously with information that changed the direction of the investigation entirely. He revealed that the syndicate had been recruiting new members from within the nightlife industry itself. These recruits were not random. They were carefully chosen individuals who could blend in, gain access to restricted areas, and help the gang maintain control without raising suspicion. Some were security personnel, while others were staff at bars and clubs. Their role was to provide inside knowledge, smuggle substances, and, most disturbingly, prevent victims from seeking help. This revelation explained many mysteries that had puzzled authorities for months. Why had some victims been ignored or blocked by people who were supposed to maintain safety? How had the gang been able to operate so efficiently, without detection? It became clear that the syndicate had created a network within the very spaces where people expected protection. By recruiting insiders, they ensured that their presence in clubs was invisible. They were not merely lurking outside, they were embedded within the fabric of Liverpool's nightlife, watching, guiding, and controlling from the inside. The gang's recruitment strategy was frightening in its sophistication. They targeted individuals who were either easily manipulated or ambitious enough to be drawn by promises of money and status. Recruits were trained to observe potential victims, recognize opportunities, and act without hesitation. They learned how to avoid police detection, how to dispose of evidence, and how to communicate subtly with senior gang members. By creating a hierarchy and a chain of command, the syndicate turned ordinary club staff into extensions of their criminal network. The city's nightlife, once a place of entertainment, had unknowingly become a controlled environment where danger lurked in every corner. For the investigation, this meant that the gang's reach was far greater than initially thought. The challenge was no longer limited to tracking the men committing the assaults. It extended to uncovering the web of enablers who facilitated their crimes. Every club, every venue, every individual had to be considered a potential piece of the puzzle. Detectives realized that without understanding the full scope of recruitment and influence, capturing the core gang members would only be a temporary victory. The network had roots, and until those were exposed, the syndicate could rebuild and continue its operations elsewhere. The recruitment twist also highlighted the psychological manipulation at the heart of the gang's methods. Victims were not just physically overpowered, they were isolated in an environment designed to make them invisible. Even when surrounded by people, they were vulnerable because the very individuals who should have provided safety were part of the syndicate's plan. The combination of drugs, intimidation, and insider control created a chilling system of fear and silence. It was a level of planning that went beyond brute force. It was methodical, strategic, and terrifyingly effective. This new understanding intensified the investigation. Detectives shifted focus to uncover the identities of recruits and their connections to the main gang. Each lead became crucial. Every clue, potentially the key to unraveling the network. Liverpool's night streets, once controlled secretly by a small group of men, now revealed a larger, more disturbing reality. A network built on manipulation, recruitment, and silent complicity, designed to operate undetected until it was fully exposed. The investigation reached a critical turning point when officers followed one of the gang members to a seemingly ordinary property on the outskirts of Liverpool. From the outside, the house looked abandoned, broken windows, peeling paint, and overgrown weeds. Neighbors assumed it was empty, a place long forgotten. But inside the building held chilling evidence of the gang's operations. Detectives discovered discarded packaging for drugs, hidden compartments, and phones with deleted messages. Most disturbingly, investigators found rooms that had been used to store personal belongings of unidentified victims. It was clear that this safe house had been a central hub for the syndicate, a location where their activities could be conducted without interference. The house revealed the organization and methodical planning behind the gang's crimes. It was not merely a storage space for illegal substances, but a place where victims could be brought, observed, and controlled. Investigators found signs of careful concealment, false walls, locked storage, and hidden entrances that allowed the gang to move people and items undetected. The level of preparation indicated that the syndicate had been operating from this location for months, possibly years, and that the scale of their activities was far greater than previously suspected. Each room told a story of control, manipulation, and fear, highlighting the calculated nature of the gang's methods. Digital evidence recovered from the property added another layer of revelation. Phones, computers, and notebooks contained lists of victims, records of drug distribution, and instructions for gang members. Even attempts to erase or encrypt data had failed, giving investigators insight into the planning and coordination of assaults. The safe house was a physical and digital archive of the syndicate's crimes, offering a direct link between their public movements and private operation. It confirmed what detectives had suspected for months. The gang was not operating randomly, but as a coordinated network with clear hierarchies, assigned roles, and strategies to avoid detection. The discovery also exposed the gang's boldness. Choosing a location on the outskirts of the city showed confidence. They believed it was far enough from the center to avoid scrutiny, yet close enough to nightlife districts to allow rapid movement. They clearly understood the importance of geography, timing, and concealment in their operations. This level of strategic thinking made them more dangerous than ordinary criminals. Their crimes were not impulsive. They were the product of careful planning, repeated practice, and an understanding of the city's weaknesses. For law enforcement, the safe house provided a breakthrough that transformed the investigation. Officers could finally link multiple incidents to a single base of operations. The evidence recovered offered concrete proof of criminal activity and strengthened the case against the gang. It also gave insight into the hierarchy, showing which members were responsible for logistics, surveillance, and assaults. Each discovery increased understanding of how the syndicate had managed to remain invisible for so long, and how deeply they had embedded themselves into Liverpool's night scene. The safe house became a symbol of both horror and hope. It revealed the terrifying scale of the gang's operations, but it also offered the tools needed to dismantle the network. With the location identified, investigators were finally able to plan coordinated action, bringing the gang into the open. What had once been a hidden empire of fear and control was about to face exposure, marking a crucial step toward justice for the victims and safety for the city's streets. The night of the raids was the most intense and carefully coordinated operation Liverpool police had undertaken in years. Officers moved quietly through the streets, keeping surveillance on known gang locations, safe houses, and suspected accomplices. Every move had been planned in advance, entry points mapped, timing synchronized, and teams assigned specific objectives. Months of investigation, analysis of CCTV footage, and insider information culminated in this moment. Detectives knew that success depended on precision, speed, and the element of surprise. Any delay or mistake could allow the gang members to flee or destroy vital evidence. As the first team approached a rundown flat in the outskirts, the tension was palpable. Inside, gang members were unaware that their operation had been discovered. Some were preparing supplies, others organizing records and digital devices. Outside, the streets were quiet, with only police vehicles and unmarked units waiting for the signal. In the city center, another team moved toward a popular nightclub that had been linked to multiple incidents. Officers entered swiftly, securing the exits and controlling every access point. Every building, street, and suspected hideout was treated with the same level of caution and efficiency. The raids revealed the full scale of the gang's operations. Investigators recovered digital devices filled with incriminating evidence, including lists of victims, schedules for assaults, and communication logs among members. Drug supplies were seized, along with paraphernalia for distribution and concealment. Hidden rooms and storage areas contained personal belongings and items belonging to victims. Every discovery confirmed what detectives had feared. This was a highly organized syndicate, operating systematically for years with little fear of law enforcement. The evidence painted a chilling picture of control, planning, and manipulation that extended far beyond individual attacks. Despite their careful planning, several gang members attempted to escape. Some fled through back alleys, while others tried to hide in upper floors of flats or abandoned buildings. Police had anticipated these moves, however, and swiftly intercepted them. Arrests were made with precision, ensuring the safety of officers and preventing destruction of evidence. Each capture was a step toward dismantling the network, and every seized device or list brought investigators closer to understanding the full scope of the syndicate's crimes. The raids also revealed the gang's reliance on insider support within the nightlife scene. Security staff, bar employees, and other recruits had unwittingly facilitated criminal activity, allowing members to operate undisturbed. Some of these accomplices were questioned and detained, providing crucial information about the hierarchy, methods, and movement patterns of the gang. This aspect of the operation highlighted how deeply the syndicate had embedded itself into the city's nightlife, making their eventual exposure both necessary and unprecedented. By the end of the night, the raids had disrupted the gang's operations entirely. Officers had seized a wealth of evidence, arrested the majority of active members, and begun the process of identifying enablers and recruiters. The coordinated action not only removed the immediate threat, but also sent a strong message to others who might have considered similar crimes. Liverpool's streets, once controlled silently by a dangerous syndicate, were finally taking back control. The night of the raids marked a turning point in the investigation, providing hope for victims, clarity for authorities, and a sense of justice that had been long delayed. The aftermath of the raids was both shocking and revealing. As the gang members were brought to court, more victims came forward, each with stories that painted a vivid picture of the terror that had been silently operating in Liverpool's nightlife for years. Women, men, and even some who had narrowly avoided being targeted described nights that ended in confusion, fear, and violation. The scale of the syndicate's crimes became undeniable, and the city was forced to confront a reality that many had refused to imagine. A coordinated network had controlled the night streets, manipulating and terrorizing people with calculated precision. During the trials, evidence from the raids and CCTV footage was presented in painstaking detail. Officers walked jurors through the gang's operations, demonstrating how the members coordinated attacks, recruited accomplices, and exploited weaknesses in the nightlife system. Victims' testimonies, combined with physical and digital evidence, created a powerful and damning case. The gang's hierarchy, methods, and carefully maintained invisibility were laid bare for the first time. The courtroom revealed the depths of manipulation and cruelty, exposing the syndicate not as a group of opportunistic criminals, but as a calculated organization that had thrived on fear and silence. The city reacted with a mixture of relief and disbelief. Nightclub owners and local authorities began implementing stricter security measures, adding more surveillance cameras, and training staff to recognize warning signs of potential crimes. Clubs that had once been considered unsafe or high risk were reassessed, and community initiatives were launched to ensure victims had support and resources. The raids and subsequent trials demonstrated the importance of vigilance, not just from law enforcement, but from anyone involved in the city's nightlife. What had been invisible for years now demanded attention, and the lessons learned would influence safety measures for decades. For the victims, the process of coming forward was both painful and necessary. Many had felt isolated and powerless, unable to speak out due to fear or trauma. The exposure of the gang validated their experiences, offering a sense of justice and closure. Support services were mobilized, providing counseling and assistance, helping survivors rebuild their lives. Though the scars of what they endured could never fully disappear, The dismantling of the syndicate allowed them to reclaim a sense of safety and dignity. Even as Liverpool slowly returned to a sense of normalcy, the memory of the gang remained as a cautionary tale. The city had learned that danger could hide in plain sight, and that silence allowed criminal networks to thrive. Authorities remained vigilant, knowing that while one syndicate had been dismantled, the potential for others to emerge always existed. The investigation and raids became a blueprint for tackling organized crime in urban nightlife, showing how careful planning, persistence, and courage could confront even the most elusive criminal operation. Liverpool streets, once dominated by fear and manipulation, were no longer under the gang's control. The exposure of the syndicate marked a turning point, demonstrating that darkness, no matter how well hidden, could be brought into the light. While the impact of their crimes would be remembered, the city had reclaimed its nights, and the story of the gang became a reminder that vigilance, justice, and community action could prevail even against the most calculated and dangerous threats.